When we think of the zombie apocalypse, the first thing we think about is killing zombies and millions of people dying. We always imagine ourselves being able to survive despite the odds against it. However, during a zombie apocalypse, zombies would not be the greatest threat to the people. Let that sink in for a minute. Zombies are not the greatest threat during a zombie apocalypse. This also holds true for a global pandemic where the virus that is devastating mankind has a mortality rate of 70% or higher. So what do these two events have in common? Well, first of all, a sudden and drastic loss of life. Secondly, both scenarios will have people fighting to survive instead of going to work and living their daily routines. It is this very disruption of our daily lives that will bring about these two great threats that most don't even think about when preparing for a zombie apocalypse or a major pandemic. When a zombie apocalypse cannot be contained, the two great threats of the zombie apocalypse or major viral pandemic will reveal themselves. This will happen when the power goes down nationwide because there is no one left to man the power stations. Computers will shut down the grid to prevent an overload. It is unlikely that the power grid will ever come up again at this point. This will take less than 24 hours to become global. Then the dark ages are back again and the first great threat reveals itself. In every city across the globe, industrial plants will react to the permanent loss of power. Some gases need to be cold enough to be stored in liquid form. If they don't have power, the cooling units will stop working. Eventually, the liquids will come to a boil and create dangerously high pressures. Many tanks have relief valves to vent gas to avoid explosions, but hundreds of thousands of tanks all venting at the same time is unimaginable. The rest that don't vent will explode from excess pressure. The gases will spread wherever the wind blows. Some of the gases are heavier than air, thus a danger to any creature that lives low to the ground or in the soil. The same chemicals that made the modern world possible are now set loose to kill us. Thousands of tons of chemicals have now escaped from the world's chemical plants. Millions of people and animals trapped in the toxic gases will perish just from inhaling chemical pollutants. Emergency backup systems, diesel generators, are keeping the world's nuclear power plants running. The diesel fuel won't last forever. Hundreds of spent fuel handling buildings are in danger of a meltdown. Each building holds approximately 400 tons of spent nuclear fuel. There are hundreds of nuclear storage sites all over the world. There are 75 in the US alone. Within a week of the power going out, diesel generators at nuclear power plants are finally running out of fuel, and the temperature inside starts to rise. In just a few days, the water will boil and evaporate. Without people there to stop it, a nuclear disaster greater than the world has ever seen is inevitable. Each plant will release a massive dose of radiation 500 times that of Hiroshima. Some of the radiation, like strontium-90, will remain active for 300 years. This radiation causes bone and bone marrow cancer. The plutonium will be radioactive for 240,000 years. Giant plumes of radioactive smoke and particles spread across the northern hemisphere. Rain will wash radiation from the sky, concentrating its deadly effects on the ground. Pine trees in the area will die first. Chlorophyll that is damaged by this radiation will cause the needles to turn red. So when traveling through that area, it will be evident that the area is highly radioactive, even without a Geiger counter. Traveling through an area like this would not be wise. The last time a forest died like this was during the Chernobyl disaster in 1986. Radiation will contaminate an area 50,000 square miles. That's the size of Alabama. This will happen again and again until all 75 plants have melted down, contaminating 3.75 million square miles of the U.S. Some areas, of course, will become more dangerous than others depending on the winds and the rains. Large animals will flee these areas, but smaller creatures will not be so lucky. In the worst hit areas, over half the rodents and insects die. The consequences of a significant decline in rodent and insect populations could potentially disrupt ecosystems, impact food chains, and have various ecological repercussions. Food in the cities and suburbs away from these plants may not be so radioactive. In total, countless millions more will die over the coming weeks from toxic poisoning and and nuclear radiation. This doesn't take into account the zombies. So how do we really prepare for such a disaster? Well, to start with, if you have an underground bunker, expect to be in there for 2 to 3 years until the rain has washed most of the toxins and radiation into the soil deep enough that it doesn't affect plant growth. If you're outside, get inside. Any house will do, but a brick or stone house is better as it will block more radiation. Before you step inside though, remove all outer layer clothing and place in a bag. These clothes are contaminated. Remember to seal the bag and label it contaminated. From this point on, you need to stay inside to prevent exposure. Have a shower if possible, but if it isn't possible, wipe all exposed skin down with baby wipes and dispose of them along with the clothing. If it has a basement, use that. Stay away from all outside walls and make sure all windows and doors are closed and locked. If possible, turn off all air conditioners, fans, and forced air heating units that bring air in from the outside. If the house has a fireplace, close the damper. If the house doesn't have a basement, stay on the ground floor towards the center of the house. And again, stay away from outside walls. Clothing and cleaning procedures are the same as in a house with a basement. If you cannot get inside, then try to keep as much skin covered as possible. Keep your mouth covered with a mask, cloth, or even a towel. This can reduce the amount of radioactive material you are affected by. Use a car to try to find a house or a shelter of some sort. A car offers very little protection, if any protection, from nuclear radiation. Have a hazmat suit and mask for everyone in your bunker. A gas mask for chemicals will also be necessary for everyone to have. Additional filters are a must for gas masks. You also might want to consider purchasing a radiation badge to monitor the amount of radiation you are being subjected to, as well as a copy of the U.S. Armed Forces Nuclear, Biological, and Chemical Survival Manual. This book can be purchased on Amazon. In regards to food, I would recommend MREs, freeze-dried food to begin with. I would also add pemmican. Enough to last 5 years should do, with a similar amount of powdered vegetables and fruits for drinking. You'll also need to have material for hydroponic setups to grow food due to soil conditions. You'll need at least a 5-year supply of water for everyone in the bunker. Also, you should consider getting a Geiger counter and anti-radiation pills for the duration of the nuclear radiation. In regards to radiation pills, there are several brands and types. I strongly suggest consulting a physician before purchasing these to determine which ones are safe for you, what side effects you may suffer due to medical problems you may or may not have. In other words, if you have an Atlas Survivor shelter, which is basically a tube or square pipe that is buried underground that you live in, you will probably have to have enough room for 5 years of food and meds and gear. You will also need to store all the supplies for hydroponics and construction materials. This is, of course, on top of all your regular survival gear and zombie weapons. If you have no such shelter, you are going to have to find a place, perhaps in an underground mine. A deep and large cave system will also do. You will have to supply yourself with all the food and gear as those with shelters in order to survive. Either way, you're going to be fighting every step of the way. People are social creatures. Being locked away for years at a time can cause psychological problems if they are not mentally strong enough. Unfortunately, there has not been one study on how people would be affected if the majority of the population were to perish. You will be going into uncharted territory with nothing to guide you but your strength and your determination. Those who stay above ground and try to drive to a safe haven will have to battle toxic clouds, chemicals, and nuclear radiation. There are also zombies to consider during the zombie apocalypse. When you take into account how old and fragile the power system is across North America and how badly it needs to be updated and repaired, you begin to realize we may not need a zombie apocalypse or a viral outbreak for this to happen. We would just need something to happen to cause enough power plants to shut down to create a rolling blackout, and the rest will happen all on its own. Until that time, thank you for watching, and remember, stay safe, be prepared, and I'll see you in the next video.